In this video, we're going to show you how to plan and install a transom along an interior wall. This could be overhead in the wall or just simply in a wall between rooms. We'll show you how to set the width and height of the transom to match your opening, and then we'll look at matching the jamb size as well. We've helped thousands of people do this, homeowners and contractors, so don't feel intimidated. All parts of this video are taken from the planning section of our website. We have videos on many different types of installations. At Transoms Direct, we build custom-sized windows to fit your opening. In this case, with windows along an interior wall, we can even help you gang multiple windows together to create a window wall. We call these combination units. But first, let's get started installing just a single window into your opening. This video is oriented around starting with a rough opening. If your starting point is a cased opening or a drywalled opening, check out the planning section of our website. We already have a video series built just for you. At Transoms Direct, our basic product is a transom sash that you order with specific dimensions, width and height. You've decided to install a transom into a rough opening, either a 4-sided rough opening like this or a 3-sided opening like this one. To facilitate this installation, a jamb will be attached around the outside edge of the transom sash so that the sash unit may be mounted into the rough opening. The jamb serves as a sort of adapter between the thinner transom sash and the thicker wall. When you add a jamb to your sash, you now have a transom unit that is slightly larger in height and width than the dimensions of the sash you ordered. Jambs are made of 1x material, and 1x material is exactly 3/4 inches thick. Since the jamb forms a perimeter all the way around the transom sash, the jamb adds an additional 3/4 of an inch along each edge of the transom sash, left, right, top, and bottom. Cumulatively, you end up with a transom unit for installation that is 1 1/2 inch wider and 1 1/2 inch taller than the sash size you order. Most customers do have us add a jamb to their transom sash before it leaves our factory. We consider such transom units with a jamb ready to install. Now, let's relate this discussion back to your rough opening and the width that you will choose for the transom sash that you order. We recommend that you order a transom sash that is 2 inches narrower in width than the rough opening that you've already built, or that you build a rough opening that is 2 inches wider than the transom sash you plan to use. We call this the 2-inch rule. Let's look at some examples. If you have a 66-inch wide rough opening already built, you would order a transom sash that is 2 inches narrower, or 64 inches. Conversely, if you plan on installing a 64-inch transom into a wall, you would build a rough opening that measures 66 inches wide or 2 inches larger in width. This 2-inch difference in width between the rough opening and the sash easily accommodates the 1 1/2 inch width added by the jamb, leaving 1/2 inch left over that can be split evenly among equal-sized gaps on each side of the transom unit as it fits into the opening. This extra room allows us some flexibility in installation to ensure that the transom unit is set plumb, square, and level into the opening. In our next video, we'll consider the height of the transom sash to order, exploring how this same 2-inch rule applies for the height of rough openings in a different context. You're planning to set a transom into an opening between rooms, or place a transom overhead in a wall. You've also elected to use a rough opening for installation. Rough openings, of course, require that a transom sash be placed into a jamb for installation. As we discussed in the previous video, jambs add 1 1/2 inch to the width and 1 1/2 inch to the height of the sash size you order. So, the same 2-inch rule applies to height just as it did to width. We recommend that you order a sash that is 2 inches shorter in height than the opening that you've already built, or that you build a rough opening that is 2 inches taller than the transom sash that you plan to use. Let's take a look at some examples. If you already have a 14-inch high rough opening already built, you would order a transom sash that is 2 inches shorter or 12 inches tall. Conversely, if you planned on installing a 54-inch tall transom into a wall, you would construct a rough opening that measures 56 inches tall. At installation, you'll place the transom unit directly atop the bottom of the rough opening, leaving you a half-inch vertical gap to adjust and shim the unit so that it's plumb, square, and level. In the next chapter, you'll determine the jamb depth that you need for your installation based on your wall thickness. After you've planned your rough opening and finalized the dimensions of your transom sash, it's time to size the depth of your jamb. Since the jamb is a sort of adapter that fits the thinner transom sash into your thicker wall, the jamb must be sized to fit your exact situation. Jambs only have one measurement that changes, the jamb depth. The jamb depth that you order should be equal to the thickness of the wall where you plan to install the transom. There are two ways of determining your wall thickness. One, by physically measuring, or two, by adding up the thickness of the wall's materials. Think of your wall as a sandwich, which we call a wall assembly. The pieces of the bread on the outside of the sandwich are the wall sheathing. In the middle of the sandwich is a framing member, which is often a 2x4 or 2x6 wall stud. When all pieces of the sandwich are in place, you have a wall assembly. If your rough opening is already built with the wall sheathing attached, use a tape measure to determine the wall thickness by measuring the outside to outside dimension between the opposite sides of the wall sheathing. This example shows a sandwich of a 1/2 inch drywall and 2x4 stud wall measuring 4.5 inches thick. This is a common wall assembly which corresponds to a common jamb depth of 4 9/16 inches. The jamb depth that you order should always be equal to or slightly larger than the actual thickness of your wall assembly. If you're building a brand new wall, you can also add up the thicknesses of the various wall components to determine your jamb depth without measuring. But beware, walls made of plaster or fire-rated materials or walls in colder climates or urban settings often have non-standard wall thicknesses. Either carefully research the actual thicknesses of each wall component or measure the actual as-built wall thickness when complete to be sure that you're ordering the correct depth for your jamb. If your wall is already built, consider using a hole saw to drill a small hole clear through the wall at the place in the wall where the transom will be installed. Place a tape measure into the hole and hook it on the opposite side of the wall to determine the actual thickness of the wall assembly. If you're remodeling a finished home, look for a door or a cased opening that exists along the same wall as where you're planning on installing your transom. You can carefully measure the jamb of these openings to obtain the wall thickness. For a door, go to the hinge side and measure to the edges of the jamb on each side of the doorstop, being careful not to include any casing along either edge. For a cased opening, measure to the edges of the flat jamb on the interior side of the opening. Again, be careful not to include in your measurement any casing that abuts the edge of the jamb. Coincidentally, the door jamb and cased opening shown in these examples both measure exactly 4 9/16 of an inch, which corresponds to the proper common jamb depth for the 1/2 inch drywall and 2x4 wall assembly that we saw in our previous example. To summarize, always order a jamb that is equal to or slightly thicker than your actual wall measurement. If you decide to calculate your wall thickness by adding the components in your wall assembly, add 1/16 inch to the sum of the wall components. A jamb that's slightly deeper than your finished wall assembly will not be noticeable after final installation.